Hi, and welcome to Textile Talks. I'm Amy Milne with the Quilt Alliance, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Emma Parker. Hi, Emma.
Hello.
And I'm joining Zoom today from my home office in Western North Carolina. And Emma, where are you?
I'm in Durham, North Carolina, in the middle of the state.
So, Team North Carolina today.
Yes.
Let us know where you're connecting from today. We're so pleased that you're here, and we're really looking forward to today's topic, one near and dear to our heart and at the root of our mission, which is quilt documentation. And this time, we're focusing on groups and communities and really giving you a how-to guide for how you can use the tools and resources that we present for your own projects. So let's get started. In case you're new to the series, Textile Talks is brought to you by the Quilt Alliance and our partners, International Quilt Museum, SAQA, Studio Art Quilt Associates, and Surface Design Association. And these talks are presented every Wednesday, almost every Wednesday. We take a break for holidays on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And they're all recorded. Emma's going to put a link in the chat now to the YouTube recording playlist for you in case you want to go back and rewatch any of them or in case you missed them. So today we're going to talk about a lot of the projects that we present and resources and all kinds of great tips. But if you don't know, the Quilt Alliance mission is to document, preserve, and share the stories of all quilts and all quilt makers. And today, Emma and I are going to talk about how your group, whether that's a guild, I realize most groups in the quilt community are guilds, but there are many other groups that meet in churches, in libraries, in artists' homes, and maybe you're a museum and you'd like to use our projects for your group. But for timing purposes, Emma and I pre-recorded this presentation. So we're going to play that video for you, and we're going to fill almost the entire hour with the program. But we want to encourage you to use this link. Emma's going to put it in the chat, quiltalliance.org/groups. It's a new page with lots of information. You can contact us through this page, and you can watch videos and look at resources and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And Emma and I will be in the chat, monitoring the chat the whole time. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation. We'd love to answer them. Okay, let's get started. Hi, I'm Amy Milne, Executive Director of the Quilt Alliance, and I'm joined by my colleague, Emma Parker, QA Program Manager. And today our goal is to help you document the quilts and the quilters in your group or your community and share that documentation with the world. These ideas are for any community or any group, and whether it's your quilt guild, art group, church group, neighborhood group, or a group of friends or family, any kind of group. First, let me introduce you to the Quilt Alliance if you're not familiar with our organization. The Alliance is a 31-year-old national nonprofit with a mission to document, preserve, and share the stories of all quilts and all quilt makers. We have two key projects, QSOS, which is Quilters Save Our Stories. It's a grassroots oral history project archived in the Library of Congress, and Go Tell It, which is a video documentation project presented on YouTube. We have visited guilds and groups across the country, both in person and virtually via Zoom, helping them document the quilts and the people in their community in a way that works for them. So that's what we want to share with you today. And Emma last year made a wonderful video to celebrate our 30th anniversary. And we're going to play it for you now so that you can hear and see and feel what the Quilt Alliance is all about before we get started.
would we have a place in history, maybe, if it weren't for our quilts?
Oh, that's very good. You're right, we wouldn't.
No, no.
You are transferring an emotion, a story, a statement, and out of this dish towel or rag or doily or whatever it was that you found, you have said something to somebody else.
We're the people that are telling the story of our culture, and that's important. I always say, and I've heard many historians say, that quilts are like cultural documents. Indeed, for me, they are, because they tell our story of the story of our existence here in the United States, and every story that surrounds that, whether it be our families, our spirituality, the politics of the day. We find all of those subject matters within the threads of a quilt.
So the fabric is
Definitely important. Well, and this definitely. But the story, the story that goes into it, and that's why it's so important to be able to document, just like what this organization is doing, to document it, because you'll come along in history and you just want to know the whole. Every quilt has a story, and it really does, and to be able to know what went into that, what was going on in that person's life, what made them create and that project at that time is important.
So, I mean, it's very nice. I think it's a great project that we can hear and access other people's stories, because the great fun thing about quilting to me seems to be, another thing I really like about it is every quilt has its story. And since there are so many stories to be told, I think of the old...
There is power in quilts. Everybody has a quilt story. Everybody remembers a quilt. Knowing those stories and hearing and listening to those stories, we know where we came from and who we came from, and we need to remember those stories. We need to celebrate who they are, because it's our DNA, maybe our larger community DNA, that connects us all together.
To find out more about the Quilt Alliance and our oral history and quilt documentation projects, you can visit our website, quiltalliance.org. And if you enjoy this presentation, I hope you'll recommend to your fellow group members that your group become a Quilt Alliance group member. We'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the program. Emma?
Yeah, so the question that we wanted to start with is, what is community quilt history, and why does it matter? So quilt history, for the Quilt Alliance, we define really broadly. It can include anything that your group decides that you want to document and how you want to document it. So it might include, if you're a group or a guild, documenting your guild activities, what programming you're doing, the programming you're hosting, the projects you're involved in, the quilt shows you're putting on and exhibits, and how you're interacting with your community. But documentation isn't just focused on the activities you're doing. It's also, and I think some groups forget this, it's about documenting the quilts that your community is making right now. So we're especially going to focus on some Quilt Alliance tools and projects to help you document those quilts. And I do want to mention that I know that many of you are already doing this in your community and in your guilds and groups. We'd love to hear from you in the chat about what you're doing to document the quilts in your area. And if you have questions for others, please chime in. So this is a chance for you and us to connect with and learn from each other. So community groups are where we gather and exchange ideas about quilts. Other than the internet, which is obviously a huge part of social aspects of quilting, when we gather together, physically it's where we get ideas, learn, and shape the quilts we make. But why is it important to document what we're doing in our communities? There are a lot of reasons. First is the Quilt Alliance's overarching reason that drives all of our projects. We believe that quilts are historical documents and that the social history of quilting is history. It's American history, it's women's history, it's economic history, art history, and local history. Documenting your community also can help you define your identity. What's the vibe of your quilt group? What kinds of quilts are you making? Do you have goals besides quilting? How are you interacting with your community? It can also help you build group morale, a specific identity and camaraderie around this is us and this is what we do. It can help you orient new members. It can be so helpful when you join a new group to find out what kind of quilts a group is making, the activities they're doing, what they find important, and to also celebrate longtime or older charter members and recognize their contributions. And finally, there are practical reasons to do documentation, such as not reinventing the wheel or thinking, well, how did we do this last time? Or what have we done before? And can we do it again? So if you have those activities documented or you're looking at quilts you've made, it makes it so much easier in the future to go back and revisit that. So there's so many things that community documentation can include. We're going to talk especially about using 2 Quilt Alliance projects to document your community, but this is really about finding something that works specifically for you and your particular group. There's so many ways to do this, and they're not going to work for everyone. It's going to depend on the size of your group, the way your activities are structured, your budget, and your priorities. So here are, in just a minute, we'll see a few activities that we'll talk about. All of these are under the umbrella of group and guild documentation. First, I'm going to talk about some of the tools that we like to have in our toolkit. So we use all of these tools at events like Community Quilt Days, but you can also use these tools as part of your just normal activities every time you meet as a group. The first one I want to talk about, and Amy's going to talk about it, is starting a group or guild history committee, or just a single historian if you have just a tiny group.
Yeah, so group history is such a great way. Having a group who's focused on this this project or this effort really helps you get organized. So you could find out if your group has ever had a history committee or group focused on just getting down and documenting the group's history. Find out if you've ever had that, if there's a history of that in your group, and if so, get it going again. Or if you don't have one, start one. You know, find those in your group who have skills that are going to be necessary for documentation, like photography and videography, even if that just means taking videos or photos with your phone, with your smartphone or smart device. It does not have to be, these do not have to be skills that these folks have done in a job or professionally. And could just be something that they have an interest in doing and have done it as as a hobby. So photography, videography, writing, or basic experience with digital record keeping. The enthusiasm of 1 or 2 people can really be very compelling, especially when you can use that enthusiasm to show your fellow members examples of what the group documentation could look like. So that's a really key element, is finding out who's got the skills. See if you've had a history of or a committee before, and then just share your enthusiasm. Identifying that team to lead the group is, as we said, really important. And you might choose to have this as a committee that is always a committee, or you might choose to have this group form a group to get started making the program happen, and then discontinue it once you've gotten started. That's up to you, as all these decisions are up to you, and you should make it work for your group. You know, if your group is not a committee group, then 1 or 2 people just take on the challenge and go for it. So a lot of groups make this a regular part of their meeting structure, or they have an event that happens regularly. And that's where it's really going to come in handy to have different roles for people to play as a part of their participation in this committee or group. That helps keep things organized. And some of those roles, as we said, are the videographer, photographer, someone to store the equipment and bring it out for use, set it up. Having a note taker is really wonderful, because that person can take down notes that maybe person who brought in the quilt has shared with everyone, but they don't say it in their video. A complete name of someone maybe who made the quilt. And so that's, a note taker role, and then an archivist or a file manager. So that might be the person that keeps track of all the digital photographs, videos, text files, and split up the work. And because you want it to be sustainable, if this is something that you want to continue doing, and make it collaborative, and most importantly, make it fun. That's the whole, that will really make this doable and sustainable, is to share your enthusiasm and have fun. So this documentation could start, or this project could start with a program that you give about what you're planning to do. So the plan itself becomes a program. So imagine your committee has gotten together, you've divvied up roles, you've maybe done a little bit of example recording of videos or photographs. Now it's time to share your plan with the rest of the group to spread that enthusiasm broader than just your committee. So schedule a presentation. Maybe if you're in a guild, if your group is a guild, you could plan a meeting just devoted to, hey, you guys, we want to start a history committee or a documentation club. If this is a group, in a community group, this could be a public free event that you invite people to come to and see if you could get them engaged. You can share the plan, you can show examples of videos and photographs you've taken already, demonstrate the equipment. This might be a great opportunity to show how low tech this project could be by showing your own mobile phone or digital device, digital phone, digital camera, and just, demonstrate how easy it is, or share a list of the equipment that you're suggesting that the group purchase. Emma's going to go over that. And then think about, maybe go ahead and propose, how about if we do this every couple months? Or how about if we do it twice a year? How about if we even do it every meeting? It depends on what your group. Again, we really are committed to the idea of flexible planning. So the plan should work for your community, for your group. If you plan to do this once a year, this planning process is going to look differently. Your committee may need to be larger. Your meetings may be different, but this is a great way to start sharing the plan with your group.
So that's our first tool, is having a committee or a historian. The second tool that we have is video. And this is one that's really, really near and dear to my heart. I have recorded more than 850 Go Tell It videos with quilters around the country and the world. And if you've been watching Textile Talks for a while, you've heard us talk about this project and seen some examples of these 3-minute videos. But I'll talk a little bit about Go Tell It and how you can use it. It's a short video format that anyone can use, and then it becomes part of our larger collection of Go Tell It videos. Amy, if you'll go to the next slide, I have a couple little bullet points here. And if you're a member of a quilt guild or other group that has a show and tell portion of your meetings, you're already pretty familiar with this format. So it's one person standing with their quilt and telling us about it. That's it. It's just with the addition of the fact that we're filming them, and it's a little bit longer, so up to 3 minutes, which feels short, but it's actually an amazing way to hear more about the quilt beyond just what we can see. So you might learn about the quilt's inspiration, a challenge that the maker had when making it, the choices they had, and you can also do a Go Tell It about a quilt you didn't make. So if you want to invite community members or church members to come and bring their family quilts, they could record a Go Tell It about quilts that they've owned and loved. Recording a Go Tell It is super easy. Anyone can do it. You just record one person talking about one quilt for 3 minutes. You can use your phone, or I'll talk a little bit about other equipment and how to get a really great video. You just want to make sure that you hold your phone landscape mode, so horizontally, wider than it is tall, for the best results. We'll watch a Go Tell It now from one of our community quilt days as an example.
Hello, I'm Margaret Bullock, and I'm a member of the Heritage Quilters of Warrenton, North Carolina. I'm a retired Cooperative Extension Service agent, and I majored in clothing and textile and related arts and worked in the area of clothing for 34 years. And now I'm in my art part of my degree. And to show you what I've done a small life story quilt which depicts traveling back and forth from Virginia to North Carolina, where my parents had a car breakdown, and the Greyhound bus picked my mother up, took her to Durham, and I was born. And it was during tobacco season, so I have tacking here to represent tobacco, and I have tobacco plants. I was born in Durham, North Carolina, in Duke Hospital. And I love quilting because I loved the way my mother and father worked together to put a quilt together.
Another method to have in your toolkit is the interview. And here I'm mostly going to talk about oral history interviews because that's what we know and love here at the Quilt Alliance. This includes interviewing and asking questions about people's quilts and their quilt making history, just like our QSOS oral history project. QSOS is a 30-year-old oral history project that's archived at the Library of Congress's American Folklife Center. It's an ongoing collection. We're excited to say that we're opening it back up for new interview collection with updated guidelines. It's typically about a 30 to 40-minute interview that touches on all aspects of someone's quilt making life. So it starts with one touchstone quilt that you start talking about, and then from there you can branch out to how did you learn to quilt, what does quilting mean to you, why do you continue to do it, what are your favorite and least favorite parts of making quilts. So even if you don't have time to conduct a full QSOS interview, you might incorporate elements of QSOS into your guild or group meetings, like having one QSOS question that you ask to every member of the group, or recording interviews with just a few select members to start. A lot of groups might want to start with founding members, or you might pick your quilt making mentor and record a QSOS interview with them. I'd be happy to talk to anyone who's interested in doing these interviews, and we'll share my contact information as well.
So the next tool for documentation is photography and labeling, and maybe that's the one that we're all most familiar with. You know, if you've heard Emma and I ever speak, or you've talked to us at a show or an event, you know that we are labeling. We are always focusing and encouraging labeling and photography too. So this really is pretty simple, taking photos of your quilts in your community and ensuring that every quilt has a label. Really important. And you might set up for your group a photo station. So why would you want to do that? Why not just photograph them at home? It is so much easier to take a photograph of a quilt if it is hanging from a stand or from the wall, somehow that it can lay flat, unless you have an extremely tall ladder and a place to get, and you can get out over that's not something that is an easy setup, but a quilt stand that you can purchase easily. Emma will talk about that when we talk about equipment. And either using the top bar to thread through the sleeve in the back of the quilt, or using clips. We have clips that we bought that I think came with the stand.
Mm-hmm.
So that allows you to clip the quilt up and you could take a really great photograph. The other thing is a person with a camera, of course, and a tripod is optional. We like a tripod because it keeps the shaking down. We're not moving the camera. It also allows you to check for positioning so that the lens of the camera is parallel to the surface of the quilt, which is really nice because you don't get that keystoning or strange reshaping in the photograph. And then space, because our quilts can be very large, right? So we want to be able to get far enough back that you get the entire quilt. So that's those are just the basic. But you can also, you know, there are a lot of different ways to use this, to use your photographs, or what you might do with your photographs. You might use them for Facebook, you might share them on social media, you might create a printed book or set up set up the photos at a group event so that you can share them. Um, you might consider setting up a photo day once or twice a year so that your group members can bring all the makes that quilts that they've made for the year and take photos of them. You may do it every meeting. That again is up to you. Um, and it means reminding everyone in your community when you're photographing, take that opportunity to remind everyone to label the quilts they've made or own. You might even take the opportunity to have a labeling party to encourage that documentation. Maybe you do that at the same time that you do your photography work, but it is so important. And the other thing is take a photo of the label. Take a photo of the back of the quilt. You'll be really glad that you did and that you had that resource. If you're going to the trouble of getting it all set up, really go for it and be thorough.
I would say, and take a picture of the quilt maker or the quilt owner with the quilt. I think that's
Yes.
something that we forget oftentimes when we have a picture of just the quilt, but sometimes we want to have the maker in the photo as well, or the recipient or whoever.
That's so important because it also sets a freeze frame, a marker of that your life and what you were like, what you kind of clothes you were wearing, what was your personal where were you in your personal timeline when you made that quilt. You'll be so glad that you did.
And so, as we said, every group and guild and community is going to be really different, and how you use these 4 tools is up to you. You might choose to set up a day for documentation and do everything at once: a labeling station, a photography station, a video station, an oral history station, like one big documentation bonanza. Or it might mean that you invite a local quilt historian or appraiser to date family quilts that people from your community bring in, so a community quilt history day. It might mean ordering a label from Spoonflower or another fabric printing company so that 100 years from now we can see what quilts from your group or your area looked like. It might even mean just keeping statistics, like how many charity quilts you did during the year and what do they look like. Then you can do a little State of the Union report or like a PowerPoint slide or graphic with little squares of each quilt that you made so you can really visualize your community impact. So it's going to depend on what kind of community you're documenting and how you want to use those tools. But those are 4 really important tools that we keep in our toolkit. Yeah. If it's a group that meets regularly, like a guild or bee, you might think about incorporating documentation into every meeting. As Amy was saying, this might include a photography station or a video documentation station. So this could be as simple as just recording the show and tell portion of your meeting, or having a little time if you have a social period before your meetings, having a go tell it station there where someone can grab a friend and say, hey, will you film me talking about my quilt? Or again, you could have a specific documentation day event. And yeah, this is a little about equipment. And we can't emphasize this theme enough that it's really choose your own adventure. But you really don't need any special equipment to get started. A smartphone works, and 2 people to hold up a quilt, or people can hold their own quilt. It's really, really nice to be able to see the full quilt though. So when you can, I would unfold the quilt and have it, even if the person has to stand in front of the quilt when they're talking about it. If you want to spend a little money and invest in a quilt stand and clips or clamps to help hang quilts, I definitely recommend it. They've gotten very inexpensive, particularly if you order a photo backdrop stand rather than an actual quilt stand. The eMart brand is what we have at Quilt Alliance, and they're very lightweight and easy to set up. Once you start really kind of wanting to up your photo and video quality, a simple tripod for a camera or a smartphone. And a lot of the tripods now come with attachments for either. So you can attach like a DSLR camera or a smartphone. You can swap it out with the same tripod. And a clip-on microphone for a smartphone or your camera can be really helpful. We like the wired kind when we're at events with lots and lots of people. But there's inexpensive wireless microphones that clip onto your shirt or you can hold, and those are pretty affordable now. And finally, if you really want to be professional, you can get a lighting kit with these softbox lighting, just to make sure, especially if your meetings or your events are somewhere without a lot of natural light. I would just say that if you do this, you also want somebody who knows how to set it up and angle it, because if you're just kind of throwing the lights up and positioning them willy-nilly, it can create a lot of shadows and actually make the quilt and the person it's more difficult to see. So if you're going to get lighting, also make sure you have someone who knows how to set it up for you. But really, you can start with an investment of just $0. And as you get more and more further into your documentation journey, you can invest in some equipment pretty affordably.
Yeah. And one thing I was thinking too is maybe bags for equipment. You might want to invest in a little mobile cart. You and I have a cart that we use that has been really useful to store everything.
Yeah, having just one kit and you know that this is our documentation kit and maybe it has all the sign-up forms that you usually use for a meeting and maybe a little thank you note card for anyone who volunteers to tell their story, and you've just got that kit. Maybe there's a pin or a button that your group or guild makes that says, I told my story, and it's only for folks who have participated. I think there's ways to incentivize, but we find that once one person starts talking, everyone else wants to tell their quilt story too.
That is so true.
Mm-hmm. So a few more tips that we've picked up is just to start super simple, and to, after you've done some documentation for the first time, especially video, which can have a lot of variables, review them as a group and think, what would you change next time? More lighting? Is the sound difficult to hear? Is the background distracting? How could you set up your quilt stand to take better photos, for example? If you are going to record a lot of videos at once or do interviews, I would do a sign-up form either between meetings, like via newsletter. If you send out a newsletter in your Facebook group, offer an online sign-up form, or you could just have a paper form as people arrive. Your group might already do that. If you have a show and tell, sometimes there's a pre-sign up, but that just really keeps things going. And also having volunteers to kind of get the next person ready as the first person is talking can be really helpful. Sometimes we have one quilt stand and 2 bars so that we can go ahead and start getting the next quilt threaded onto the bar, and then we can just pop that on. That really keeps things moving. And finally, make a plan for where your documentation material is going to live long term. So decide, are you going to put it on your group or guild's website? Are you going to put it on a YouTube channel? Are you just going to share it on a Facebook page? Maybe you want to save it on a Google Drive or create a scrapbook. You can get a free individual Google account for your group or guild that gives you a single email address. I would just make sure that multiple people have the login there for continuity. But that's a really good thing to have if you don't already have it, because it gives you a lot of online storage space.
Now let's talk about sharing the documentation. You've done some documentation, let's say we're going to focus here on videos. So filming a Go Tell It video is a real accomplishment. It's not difficult, but you're going to feel really great when you've done this and you've got a small collection of videos. It's time to show them off. And I say share them with the world, but you can share them with your small community. You can share it with just inside your guild. That's, again, up to you, and fit that to your goals for your group. It might be a nice way to invite community members in. It's an educational event. So here's just 2 ideas. Consider having a movie night or a movie lunch or a movie breakfast where you screen the Go Tell It videos that you've recorded together. You can invite community members, as I said, and by that I'm meaning non-quilters, maybe people that love quilts but are not quilters. And that will give them a really great view into what your passion is and sort of why you do what you do. And remember, Go Tell It videos, if we've not said before, are for people who make quilts, but they're also for people who own quilts. So you may, in your community, decide to do this all with quilts owned by someone who didn't make them. So they're recording that Go Tell It, and then you're going to share it with the group. You might share it. It might all be family members who record these videos. Maybe you had a relative who was very prolific and you want every family member who owns one of those quilts to do a Go Tell It. And then you're going to have a movie night with the whole family on Zoom and screen them. How cool would that be? So invite the group members to share the quilt, to share their videos as a group, but also you might even want to, if you're getting together in person, you could bring the quilt that you shared in your Go Tell It, because inevitably someone's going to say, oh man, I want to see a detail. I want to see that close up, or I want to see the back of it. I want to see the label. So definitely recommend bringing the quilt with you if you can. And then the second idea for sharing your documentation and presenting your stories would be to use the video documentation. You could do this with photographs too, like detailed photographs or audio recordings, is to create QR codes. And I'll show you what those look like. They're the little squares with all the black lines and squiggly graphics that you scan with your device, smartphone, iPad, whatever, and it brings up then whatever has been set to link to that QR code. So QR codes can be made with free software. There's a Google related version, QR code generator, I think it is. And it's a really simple thing. You put in, so it does require that you've already uploaded your Go Tell It video to YouTube. We can help you do that. We have a do-it-yourself page on our website where after you've taken the video, you can upload it. We add it to the Quilt Alliance YouTube channel, and then we share the URL with you, and you can make the QR code. We do this with guild members all the time, and I'll show you an example of that. But that allows you to print out the QR code on the wall label for that quilt in an exhibit or a quilt show. So all of a sudden you've got a multimedia presentation because you have a quilt on the wall and you have a label where a viewer can scan the QR code and then listen to the video of the person talking about the quilt. This would work in a community exhibition at a library where you're showing antique quilts owned by someone else. It would work at a history museum where the curator talks about and records Go Tell It's about the quilts in that collection, and they want to then integrate those videos into the exhibit. Another thing we were thinking about is, it doesn't have to be a QR code. It could be a good old video monitor playing the videos in the space, and either the sound is being shared in the room or you could do headphones. There are a lot of ways to do this. And here is a guild. I'm going to show you an example of a guild that we worked with that is the Nimble Thimblers of Wakefield, Massachusetts. This is in this first video. I'm going to show you two example videos from the Nimble Thimblers. This is Robin D'Antona. She was the person in that group who really got it going. She had seen, I think we did a lecture for the guild. They joined us as a guild, as a group member. And so I showed them this example, and she got a bee in her bonnet and she said, I'm going to do this. And this guild recorded 27 videos, which I think is so amazing. And we worked together to make QR codes, and I'll show you in a minute what that looked like in their exhibition. Let's watch the videos first.
Hello, my name is Robin D'Antona, and I'm from the Nimble Thimblers Quilt Guild in Wakefield, Massachusetts. And this piece is going to be shown at our quilt show, Quilt Stories, in September of 2024. This came from a photograph taken of my granddaughter, Aria. And I called it Arabesque, but she corrected me and told me that it's really called Scorpion. this position she's in. And I loved it so much that I made this quilt. And after I completed the quilt, it felt like it needed a little bit more. So I painted the frame with the help of a friend to match the sky in the quilt, because I wanted the focus to be on my dear Lady Aria.
Love that. And I love how simple it is. She's not using a mic. She's not using a special setup. The quilt is small and she can hold it. So it doesn't have to be a quilt stand. Given the size of the quilt, you make decisions to, alter that formula. They do, I think, have a tripod that they're using with a cell phone, but it could be that they're just holding it. But I love that they did it outside and you've got that great natural light. And I think the sound is okay. It could be a little bit louder, but it's perfectly fine and audible. So let me show you one more they did.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Coviello, and I live in Saugus, Massachusetts, and I belong to Nimble Thimblers in Wakefield. I've been a member about 2 years now, and the ladies haven't got to see this quilt yet because I've been a little shy at showing it. But I made it, I was inspired to make it for my mother, because she loved to garden, and reminded me of all her beautiful flowers, and us sitting at the table watching the stars at night and spending time with her. It's cotton with a wool applique, the buttonhole stitch on it, and it was very fun picking out all the colors and seeing how all the harmony. It was my first scrappy quilt I ever made, and I'm very, very proud of it, and I love to show it off.
One of the nice things about having video or audio documentation is you get to hear the person's voice. And you can hear in both of those quilters' voices their Boston area accent. It's just so beautiful. I love that part of documentation and oral history. And the next slide here, you can see the exhibition that they did in September. You can see one of the maybe the opening or one of the nights of the exhibit, and you can see the quilter hanging. And then in this slide, you can see the wall label with the QR code. So this is Suzanne Sullivan's quilt up here in the far left of the photo on the left. And in her video, she talks about the quilt as something she did about her retirement with her husband, and that's the QR code. So the person in the photo is scanning the QR code that will bring up the video. So a really great way to add something to an exhibition, a quilt show, a display in a live, maybe even just one quilt on display somewhere in a community space. This would work really well.
These are just a few other ideas that are might provide some programming or some interactive activities for you and any group, but are also pitched towards documentation. So you might have a one-day flash quilt show and get a few members or as many as you can to bring quilts and hang them for a casual impromptu quilt show. And maybe you kind of do a live go tell it where you go around the room and each person talks about their quilt, or you just stand there and you can view different quilts that no one has seen. You could do a meet a member segment. So you could do a QSOS interview or a QSOS inspired interview at each meeting or an event. You could do a little show and tell around a theme. So having everyone bring their first quilt, their masterpiece quilt, or a collaborative quilt they've made, or my favorite, orange quilts, because that's my favorite color. You could have a work day where you just work on doing labels. Everyone brings one unlabeled quilt and you just sit around and get it done. Maybe you all volunteer to bring different materials that you might use for labeling. Or having a little trunk show, like a collaborative trunk show or a one-person trunk show. Even if it's not a famous quilter coming to show you their quilts, I think it's a great idea to have one member kind of talk about their quilting journey, and they can show how their style has changed. It's always fun to see people share early quilts and then how they've evolved into the quilts that we see now. Because, You know, for some of our guild members or group members that we see what they're making today, we might be surprised to see what they were making back in the 90s or the 70s or something else. And sometimes there's a real through line there, and sometimes there's not. Those are a few other ideas.
So we mentioned before about the idea of Quilt Alliance group membership and how we work with groups. And this is one way for a guild to help support the Quilt Alliance to cover staff time for this kind of collaboration. Quilt Alliance group membership currently costs $200 a year, but that includes a free on-site or virtual Quilt Alliance presentation for your group, so a lecture, a slideshow. That doesn't include travel or accommodations or per diem if we're coming to you, but the Zoom version is free and included with your membership. We also offer affiliate membership for all of your members. So that means basically the same benefits as an individual at the friend level individual membership would receive, and that's a savings of $30 a year. So each member of your guild can then become a Quilt Alliance member, because we want them to benefit. If they're all benefiting from all the resources we have, then that makes your group even stronger because they have access individually to all of our resources. And included in that group membership is access to our recording archive, which includes our educational events from called Quilters Take a Moment from 2020 up through this year, 2024, and a web show we did called Story Bee, which has interview and studio tours, and there are 38 episodes there. So you could use that content as a guild or group presentation. We're fine with you showing that to your group as an event. Also have 2 free banner ads available to you in the Quilt Alliance newsletter. So that's a great way to, if you're going to do a documentation day or a community day, we can advertise it as a partner in our newsletter. So I hope that you will consider that. If this is something you're thinking, we really want to do this, joining the Quilt Alliance is a great way to have our support in a focused way, and also for you to then support what we're doing. I think that there are many ways we can help you. And I think that, as Emma said, a lot of you are probably already doing some of this. So not only do we want to help you, but we want your help, which should say, and vice versa, because having your input on what's working in your guild is really useful to us. But as you know, if you're interested in that group membership, we will provide a free program. We really do tailor that to each group, because as we keep saying, every group, every community has different needs and different ideas about how they want to document. And this isn't just for guilds. As we said, this is for community groups, artist groups, church groups. There are just so many ways, schools, universities, colleges, there are many ways that groups can use our resources, and we're glad to consult with you about how to document. Emma's done phone calls with groups about technical questions, about setting up, about purchasing equipment, and our content is, that's one of the biggest things that we can provide as a resource. We have over 1,200 QSOS interviews archived in the Library of Congress that you can draw from if that's the project that you're interested in trying. And how many Go Tell It's, Emma?
Almost 1,000 now. I think about 900 or a few more. So
many, and so many were filmed by groups. So there are playlists on our YouTube channel with videos just from one group. So you can browse those playlists on our YouTube channel. And then we have a lot of resources and handouts that are downloadable. If you become a member, you have easy access to all that in your membership portal that is customized, placed just for your member content. And that includes a documentation guide, which has content from photographing, videography, labeling, washing, storing quilts, and just some sample documents about getting down the details of your quilt. So documentation templates. And anything else to add to our ways we can help you, Emma?
No, we'd love to hear what you're doing and how you can help us better understand what questions you have and what kinds of things you want to document in your community. But please do reach out if you have any questions. We'd love to hear what you're up to and also help you out if this is something you're interested in getting started, because it can feel daunting, but really once you do it, it's so exciting. And I think once people start telling their quilt stories and start showing their quilts, it's hard not to, it's infectious.
Yes, it really is. So contact us if you have any questions or you just want to explore an idea that you already have or to get started. So thanks so much, and we hope to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll ask Emma, others, Emma. So we have a little bit of time for questions, and one of the things I want to comment on is that Donette Cooper, I don't think your message went to everyone, but the host and panelists saw it, Donette. If you want to repeat that so everybody can see it, she is a member of the 30-year-old Guild, African American Guild in Maryland called Uhuru. I'm going to say that I'm butchering that, but Uhuru Quilters Guild. Sorry, Donette, please correct me. That they're working on a book. They're publishing a book. They've had a historian, had a history committee. They're working on a book about the history of the guild and the work of the members and pictures and artist statements. And they also have a YouTube channel with recordings of their quilters, of their members talking about their work. So I think, Emma, our next assignment is a textile talk where we invite Donette and members of her guild and maybe someone from Nimble Thimblers and some other groups who are doing, oh, thank you, Donette. Other groups who are doing this work in their own way to do a panel discussion and talk about, why that worked well for their guild, why they decided to do a book and a YouTube channel, things like that. Because I think when we approach this set of slides, and yes, we will have these slides will be available through the recording of this textile talk, and we're also welcome to just share parts of the presentation as slides or a PDF with you. But one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure that everyone sees or can use part of this or all of it. Because you don't have to develop go tell it videos and submit them to us. They can be your own project, right?
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway is we presented a lot of ideas and you don't have to do it all. And starting small, and even maybe you do a mini interview with one person every other time you meet or something. And that's a tiny little seed that starts to plant the idea that, oh, our stories are really important. So I think it's start small, and I think the enthusiasm will grow for sure.
Yeah, and we do. You mentioned the list. Someone asked if we have a list of QSOS questions, and we are very close to publishing that list and sharing it so you can use it for ideas. And as Emma said, you can use just one of the questions if you want to get started. The nice thing about a consistent set of topics or sort of starting points for an oral history project are that the collection each interview has a potential for having a relationship to the full body of interviews. So one of the questions we ask is, have you ever used quilting to help you get through a difficult time in your life? And so that's something that you could search in the collection, but you could just use one question and, as you said, make that part of a video response. But oh, this is neat. Denise says in the chat, I worked with the State Folk Life Association and received a fellowship to do a community documentation and wrote it up for their annual journal. That's such a good point. Yeah, that's so cool that you did that. And I think that's the other way that this can can serve to tell others in the world outside the quilt world what kind of things are happening in our community. I think the majority of people have no idea how many quilt guilds there are, how many people, how many quilters there are, and how many quilts are beloved in our community. And this is a great way to share that, is to do oral history. Emma, what is the best way for someone to get involved with QSOS right now? If they
Yeah.
want to be involved, where are we?
Yeah, so we would love to have some beta testers. If you're interested in doing a QSOS interview with anyone you know or having someone interview you, please do get in touch. Amy will put my email address, or I'll put my email address in the chat in just a moment. And we would love to just have people test it out, try to break our form, tell me everywhere that it makes perfect sense and everywhere that it's confusing, and your experience with it. So that would be a tremendous help right now. And we do also have some other sort of technical work, moving interviews over from one system to another. And so if that's something that's interesting to you and you love computer work, get in touch also. But really, beta testers would be a fantastic thing if you want to interview someone in your guild, someone in your group, you're a family member, a neighbor. I would love to hear from anyone who's interested.
For some reason, I can't type your, there's a window blocking that.
I'll put it in.
Chat box right now, Emma.
And I'll just say it out loud too. It's QSOS at quiltalliance.org.
Yeah, and I just put in the also the oh great, and our groups page is quiltalliance.org/groups. So I'm going to wrap it up and share my screen again so that I can let you know what's going on next week. Next week's Textile Talk is, drum roll, with Surface Design Association, part 2 of their Learn and Make series. So I hope you'll join us then. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I hope that you will continue to get in touch with us and tell us what your guild or group or community is up to. We'd love to know. We'd love to share it. And as I said, I think we're going to look into planning a next a panel discussion for those who are doing the documentation out there and who want to share. So thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you so much to our sponsors and to all of you who have made donations to the Textile Talks project. We appreciate you so much.